Hello and welcome back to Madison, Wisconsin. Beautiful Madison, Wisconsin. We are here for the second annual CubeCon. I'm Andy Mangold. I'm in the booth with Jamie Topples. Your first CubeCon, correct?
Yes.
And how are you feeling so far?
I'm excited to be here. It's kind of wild to see all these amazing cards. I just did a draft and it was very blinged out, all
Oh
shiny.
yes, yeah. The Live a Dream cube. David does not pull any punches there with the card versions in that cube. Yeah, it's so nice to see everyone's labor of love here. You know, so many people that come to this convention, they all have their project they've been working on forever, and we get to see my own labor of love on stream here right now. Our stream partner is NRG. Thank you to NRG for helping us put together this great stream. This is our last event of the evening, and it is going to be a team draft of my very own Bun Magic cube. Jamie, can you review a team draft for those at home that maybe don't know what that is?
Sure. So it's 2 teams of 3, and they sit every other around the table. And you get to draft your deck, and then afterwards you get to build your deck with your team. It's so much fun to be able to play Magic with your friends this way.
Yeah, it's
My
great.
favorite.
So you get to build with your team. You also technically get to help during the games too. If you want some information on a mulligan decision from your opponent, or you can get a little feedback from them. And importantly, for our coverage purposes here, the teams are going to win and lose as a team. So your individual record doesn't matter. All that matters is that your team gets the wins. And our teams tonight are Team Wisconsin, which is Caleb Durward, Sam Black, and J-Bro. Caleb being last year's CubeCon champion, versus Team England. We're going international this year at CubeCon with Pro Tour top 8 champion, not champion, with a recent Pro Tour top 8 on his heels. We have Dom Harvey. We also have Emma Partlow, ready for TCG player, and Vince, better known as Pleasant Kenobi. So from across the pond, they are coming here to battle in Madison, Wisconsin.
That's a fierce field.
This is a stacked table. I would not want to be at this table with all of these skilled and seasoned players. So I expect to see some fireworks in this draft. Our featured drafter is going to be Dom Harvey. I happen to know for a fact that Dom has a little bit of an unfair advantage. He's the only person that has actually played this cube. Dom has visited us in Baltimore and actually played this cube before. Here he is diving into Pack 1. It looks like he's pulled Lightning Bolt to the front here, thinking maybe start on a nice cheap interactive spell. I also see him considering maybe Asika's Chariot, Skyclave Apparition, or Field of the Dead. What do you like here, Jamie?
Well, I mean, I love how he's flicking the cards around and showing his choices, what he's thinking about taking.
Dom, no stranger to being on coverage. Looks like he's going to start on Chariot. So that 4-mana vehicle that makes 2/2/2 cats when it enters the battlefield. Dom looking to secure his top end of the curve perhaps early on in this draft. I love Asika's Chariot. It's a card that when it first got previewed, I didn't think I liked it. And then I played with it a little bit and realized I did really like it, actually. It's so cool that it's got a self-contained little engine, just makes more cats on its own. Or if you have another token you can generate, then it can do some really cool, unexpected stuff. Here we are in Pack 2, and we're looking at a Dismember, a Fairy Mastermind, or perhaps a Sylvan Library, if we want to stay on color.
Oh.
And that's a Dismember that Dom has taken there. Effectively a colorless card if you're willing to pay the life for it, which I know he will be in this environment. Now, this cube is relatively low curving compared to other cubes of this power level, so the curves are going to be low. People are going to be taking game actions on the first turns of the game that really matter. It doesn't mean the games are always fast. It means that your opponents are going to have cheap removal spells for your cheap threats, and that's the way these games tend to go. So thinking about what your curve looks like is really important. All right, now it looks like we've got a Windswept Heath pulled to the front. Ooh, but Croxa, Titan of Death's Hunger, I think is one of the power outliers in this cube. The question is Dom going to move into 2 more colors or take a safe Windswept Heath? And it looks like he has decided on a Windswept Heath. Fix your mana here. This cube does break Singleton for fetch lands and shock lands. So there are 2 copies of every fetch land. So there are 2 Windswept Heaths running around, and there are 3 copies of every shock land, though we are only drafting 3/4 of the cube because this is a 6-player pod as a team draft as opposed to a full 8-player pod. So who knows what we'll see. Oh, my goodness. Uro still in the pack. Now that's an on-color Titan in addition to Titania, Protector of Argoth. That's Uro, Titan of Nature's Wrath. And it looks like Titania is the pick, leaving Uro for somebody else. That's going to be a late Uro there. So far, Dom, just mono green, not venturing into a second color, but he's got his Windswept Heath to fix for mana.
It's like a safe foundation he's starting.
Yes, playing it very safe, I think, so far. Now we see Explore and Dig Through Time pulled to the front of this pack, it looks like. I'd be surprised to see Dom take an Explore here, to be honest. Unless he's brewing something that I can't imagine. Looks like maybe also Dark Confidant in the mix. Bob himself is, in fact, in attendance at the event here at CubeCon this year. I think he took the Explore, unless cards got shuffled around in a way that I couldn't see. It seems like Dom took Explore there.
Do you think that's a safe pick?
You know, it's still on color. That's a card that I don't think is among the power level you'd expect to see taken 5th pick, I think we're on right now. It seems like something you want to get much later on if you're going to be the green deck. Dom so far taking Titania, the Explorer, the Asika's Chariot, Dismember, and the Windswept Teeth. Those are the picks we have so far. Again, unless he did some sort of, sleight of hand there with that pick, which he might have done. We couldn't really see what was going on there off the bottom of the camera. Now we see Sensei's the Binding Top, Marsh Flats pulled to the front, maybe even a Path to Exile. All right, let's see what Dom's going to take here. Sensei's the Binding Top, a great example of a card that gets a lot better with all of these additional fetch lands. And we do see the Marsh Flats being taken there. So Dom focusing on his mana at this part of the draft. Now we're back to where we started. So this is the pack that Dom opened. One of the cards he was considering initially was that Skyclave Apparition, and it has tabled.
Wow.
So nobody's taken that, which is probably the most appealing white card in the pack. Though the question now is, do you want to go into a second color or just continue to stake out mono green? And it looks like we are just still sticking to green. I don't know this for a fact. I have not talked to Dom about his strategy, but based on how he's drafting, I would say it's almost as if he's forcing mono green and not really strongly considering many of the other options in the pack here. All right, now, interestingly, in this pack, the green card in this pack is Jarail Monovuli Recluse. Forgive my pronunciation on that word there. And that is a green card, but it triggers when you draw your second card each turn, which is not a thing that's as easy to do in mono green. So it tends to be a card you often want to play in like a blue-green deck or, a Jund deck with some other ways to get card draw. So not the kind of card you want in your mono green deck, even though it is a green card. So I got some sort of arrangement here, some sort of icon. Oh my goodness, the Croxa is still in the pack. At some point, somebody's going to be forced to play this Croxa. Kasali Pride Mage now pulled to the front. Finally, we see a card of a second color taken. That's our green-white 2-drop. Lets you remove an artifact or enchantment, or just gives your creatures Exalted. Interesting strategy we see here. I gotta say, it's so interesting as a Cube designer to watch your Cube be drafted, especially by much better players, frankly, than myself or most of the people in my local playgroup. And to still see Croxa floating around this pod is a bit of a shock to me. Now we see Teferi Temporal Pilgrim. This is the new 5-mana Teferi at the front of this pack here. Questing Druid, once again, a card that is not actually a mono green card at all. That card is going to trigger and get a +1/+1 counter when you cast a non-green spell. So green heavy deck actually the least well equipped to take advantage of that. And Dom has got this little sleight of hand he's doing the picks here. I think that was the Teferi, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe moving in on blue a little bit. I believe that was a quick dig through time.
Wow.
Very little thought given to that, unless I didn't see that correctly. Now we got, all right. Not picking up that Daze, though. I guess even though we're seeing some blue cards, it doesn't seem like Dom expects to have many islands in play, perhaps. Daze, of course, blue spell, but you really want to have the lands with the actual basic land type island to take advantage of them. Some late red cards here. Looks like maybe red, not that popular at this table. Let's review our picks, Dom. Thank you. All right, we got fetch lands. I'm trying to make sure we missed. So we did get the Skyclave Apparition and the Kasali Pride Mage, so perhaps we are green-white. That was a dig through time he picked. So we're in Bant, but really heavily leaning green. Now that Explorer, that card that I said I was surprised to see go early, does work really well with Jarail, the card that triggers on your second card draw each turn. So perhaps a little brew there, making that card work even outside of its best environment, which is more like a blue-green deck. How do you feel about this deck so far that Dom's drafting? Do you like playing mono green?
I do. I think it's really fun to ramp and be consistent. All
right, now we see a Tarmogoyf that Dom is admiring. We also see Lurrus, which I think is very likely one of the best cards in this cube. Dom not in a position really to take advantage of Lurrus, but it seems like perhaps considering it nonetheless. I don't think it's entirely too late to switch lanes, but his first pick was a 4-drop he wouldn't be able to play alongside Lurrus. Titania was a card he took really highly, he wouldn't be able to play alongside Lurrus. So instead it looks like we are looking at perhaps Noble Hierarch, perhaps Tarmogoyf, and it will be Noble Hierarch for Dom. That does fix for his two other colors, white and blue.
Do you think that Goif's going to wheel?
That's a great question. I don't really have a good sense of the sensibilities of this table. I think he actually has a decent chance of wheeling that Tarmogoyf, yeah. Here we see Nissa, who shakes the Whirlpool to the front, alongside Mawlock, a card that has really impressed me from the Warhammer 40k set. You don't always get to really see the competitive pedigree of some of these supplemental products because, it wasn't printed into standard. People aren't doing, drafts of Warhammer 40k, but Mawlock is a card that has really impressed me and my local playgroup. So perhaps a reason to be red, but Dom says, no, let's stick it out with these green cards. And, the cards like Nissa, who shakes the world, that's your payoff for being mono green. That's the reward for taking that Explorer, pick 4, pick 5.
Nissa's pretty mean.
It's true. There aren't an abundance of Planeswalkers in this environment. The games tend to be very quick and fast, and Planeswalkers, they're great if you can protect them. And in this cube, there's very often a lot of pressure on the board. Your opponents are going to have creatures in play. It's harder to protect your Planeswalkers. So there's not as many running around, and I think Nissa is a premier option. Okay, now we see Once Upon a Time, Temple Garden. That is the fetch land or the shockland rather, that Dom needs to turn on his fetch lands. Taking the Once Upon a Time, though, which is, Once Upon a Time is basically a fetch land. You're going to go and get the land you need from the top 5 of your library, which is also going to serve to fix mana, in addition to finding action late if he top decks it later on in the game. All right, what we got here? That's an Abundant Harvest pulled to the front, an Elvish Reclaimer pulled to the front, Elspeth's Smite, and Knight of the Reliquary. Now, Knight of the Reliquary, a great card in the lands deck. We did see Field of the Dead in Pack 1, and it did not end up in Dom's pool. So even though we do have Titania, we now have Knight of the Reliquary, we've got a couple fetch lands floating around. There's definitely a little bit of a land sub-theme here, but I would not say that Dom is drafting the lands deck. So maybe not perhaps best equipped to take advantage of Knight of the Reliquary. He's maybe looking now for something like an Urza's Saga or a Wasteland to really make that Knight of the Reliquary shine. All right, here we see Dom considering the Wandering Emperor, Augur of Autumn, and looks like maybe on the on-deck circle there is Territorial Kavu. Wandering Emperor is another sort of high-end card. The curve of this cube, unlike the Live the Dream cube, which we saw earlier today, the curve of this cube really tops out around 4 or 5. So I would say Dom's curve is already very healthy on the top end. We do see him taking that Wandering Emperor. He's really expecting, I think, to want to go over his opponents based on the picks we see him making. Now we got an option for a Mana Dork. We have a Mishra's Bauble, a Treetop Village, a card that I adore. Would love to see Dom make use of it, but it looks like we're going to stick with the Arbor Elf. Just try and cast these 4 or 5 drops a couple turns early. Nothing wrong with that. In this cube, you can also pair that Arbor Elf with cards like Utopia Sprawl and Wild Growth to get a Ponza-like injection of super fast mana. Now Dom is deciding between Deeproot Wayfinder and Godless Shrine, it seems. And looks like maybe the Deeproot Wayfinder. This is the card that surveils, and then you get to return a land to play, which is a nice way to fuel graveyard synergies and also benefit from landfall synergies as well. So it kind of ties together the decks that have land archetypes as well as Graveyard Matters archetypes. Passing on the Life from Alone there. Not interested in the Life from Alone for this deck, and instead taking Traverse the Ulvenwald. I think this card's interesting in how to evaluate it. There's a lot of cards end up in the graveyard in this cube pretty quickly. The spells are cheap, so you get instants and sorceries there quickly. We've got twice as many fetch lands as normal, so you're going to have lands in your graveyard almost all the time. So turning on Delirium is very possible in this cube. And once you have Delirium on, Traverse the Ulvenwald is kind of just like Green Sun Zenith, that you pay 1 green extra and you can go get any creature and put it into play because you then cast it, obviously. Now Dom taking that Hogak. I got to admit, this is a card I added somewhat recently to the cube, and I don't know how good it is, but I would love to see Dom do some stuff with this card. I mean, obviously, its constructed pedigree is impressive. This card caused a lot of problems in all of the Magic formats, really, and it had to be dealt with. But can Dom make it work here in Singleton when his deck is a little bit less focused? All right.
Did the Goyf not table?
The Goyf did not table, so no Tarmogoyf for Dom. That's what you get for not taking your 2 drops highly. Now, he's taking a Godless Shrine. I don't believe we have any black spells in our pool yet, if my memory serves me. We have Dismember technically, but again, Dismember effectively a colorless card. So that Godless Shrine perhaps a little speculative on Dom's part. Maybe he's hoping to get a black card later on that's really worth splashing for. Here we're looking at Urza's Bauble and Territorial Kavu. Bauble, a great example of a card here that will just help with Delirium. If you can combine it with another piece of card draw, it can trigger something like Jarell, though it's not the best at triggering Jarell because it does draw on the next turn. We're going to take the Kavu instead. Now you get the free Treetop Village, Dom. You get to play it regardless. I hope it works for you. All right, here looks like a Bomat Courier. Not interested in that mutagenic growth. Once again, a effectively colorless card. And here, our commentary friend Justin Parnell will be shocked to see Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, as one of the last 2 cards in this pack. And in fact, it will be last pick. Dom is not taking it, even though he is playing a white-green deck that is heavy in creatures. Someone got a last pick Thalia, probably can't take advantage of it. All right, how is this draft shaken up? We've got a real hard commitment to green from Dom here, and I would say a commitment to high mana value spells. We see Dom prioritizing the few 4 and 5 drops that the cube supports, perhaps trying to go over his opponents and expecting them all to be playing a little bit smaller, lower to the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like he's well set up to go into the next pack.
This is actually not too dissimilar from the deck that Dom drafted when he played this cube before at my house, and I was so mad because he was playing mostly green creature deck, and I was playing this control deck. I was playing him in the finals, and I got him to the right spot where I thought I was going to turn the corner, and I tried to resolve my Planeswalker, and he mana leaked me. It was the only blue spell I'd seen the entire game, and I'm like, you're playing mana leak your green creature deck? And yeah, it turns out it worked out really well for him. So perhaps he's leaning on his positive experience last time and trying to make a similar deck come together, mostly green with selective splashes where it makes sense for power outliers. I'm curious to know who ended up with that Kroxa and that Uro, and see, because those are 2 really powerful cards in this cube that have been going around, and someone's got that Lurrus. And actually, interestingly, we saw that Dom was forced to pass that Lurrus to his right at the beginning of this pack, and then gave the person directly to his right that last pick Thalia. So I said statistically maybe not likely that person can take advantage of it, but if the person took Lurrus, then they just got a free Thalia last pick, which is, I mean, poor Thalia. I think she deserves better, personally.
Yeah. Can I ask you, why is it called the Bun Magic Cube?
Yes, you can, because I get this question all the time, and the more I can answer it, the better. So here we're going into pack 3. I will answer your question, though, as we, and we see J-Bro here brandishing Thraben Inspector at the camera, really kind of menacing us with Thraben Inspector, perhaps his favorite card. Dom's taking Swords of Plowshares here. This cube is named after my local playgroup in Baltimore, and this playgroup predates me. It's about a decade old at this point, and it started as a playgroup that was just meeting up to play Commander at like coffee shops and like restaurants around the downtown area. And one of the places they played the most was a place called the Bun Shop in Baltimore. And so they eventually came to call the group the Bun Magic Kitchen Table Pro Tour, which was a very, cheeky name because they're all, fiercely casual players. And because that was the name of our playgroup, my cube was the first cube in the playgroup, and I just named it after the playgroup because I wanted us to have a cube to play. And all these years later, that is the name it still sports, to the confusion of many. Now, Dom picking between Eternal Witness and Giver of Runes and deciding to go with that Eternal Witness here. So still leaning, I think, very hard on green. I think Giver of Runes a better card in this cube than Eternal Witness. But, especially in a mono green deck, Witness is great when you know you're going to have good targets in your graveyard to get back. But Dom does not have that many removal spells so far. We have just the Dismember, if memory serves, maybe a Path to Exile. Okay, we just saw him take Swords of Plowshares, actually, so right at the beginning of this pack. So, that card's a lot better when you have cheap cards in your graveyard you can get back. The baseline in this cube, for sure, is just getting your land drop, because you're going to have a lot of fetch lands. You'll very often be able to turn your Eternal Witness into another land. Now taking Birds of Paradise, going to help with all of these splashes to perhaps play these slightly off-color cards. We see Territor Kavu in the pool as maybe his only red card, a couple little white cards here. Now it's a choice between Timeless Dragon, Unexpectedly Absent, Elite Spellbinder, maybe even considering an Abrupt Decay, which I do think is one of the best removal spells in this environment, given how low curving it is. Dom looking like he's going to maybe take the big card again. Once again, going big with that Timeless Dragon. It's a 5-drop, but it's a 5-drop you can also just cast for 2, which makes it a little easier to stomach in a cube like this, where you can't always just sit around and do nothing until you get to 5.
So the curve mostly ends at 5? There's a few 6-drops?
There is only one actual 6-drop. There are other cards that technically cost 6 mana, like Shark Typhoon, but you're not actually playing Shark Typhoon very often. So there's one card that you actually just have to cast that's above 5 mana, and that's Primeval Titan. Otherwise, everything else up there has some alternate costs or some other modes that are a little bit cheaper. Looks like some table talk going on. This is a talkative crew. Got J-Bro there, who's never going to miss an opportunity to try and charm the table. And, I'm actually a little bit perturbed because now we see the camera pan out and, in fact, learned that the person who got the last pick Dahlia was J-Bro, notorious for playing mono-white aggro in the Magic Online Vintage Cube, and who I would be very shocked if he didn't take that Luris in Pack 2, pick 2.
So he's well set up.
I'm already a little scared of J-Bro's deck, and I have so little information about it. But here we are back to Dom looking at a Blood Crypt, perhaps, to enable some greedy splashes, or a Mystic Confluence. I gotta say, as the Cube designer, I'm getting a little worried for Dom's curve here. The big stuff, you really got to make sure that your deck is prepared to go to the late game to get to those 5 drops. And if Dom doesn't have enough early interaction or cheap creatures to throw in the way of his opponents, he might just get run over before he can cast his Mystic Confluence to begin with. Manamorpho is also an option here. Much cheaper. Again, kind of helps Dom with his interesting splashes, but not the most powerful card in his deck. He doesn't have any spellcast synergies. He will make a cat with Jarail with Manamorphose, but it really belongs in a more prowess-style deck that cares about casting spells. So we're taking the Mystic Confluence and just going to stick with that 5-drop. Back to the pack we opened. Balance still in the pack, so a nice little treat for somebody who's trying to play Control. I don't think that person is Dom, though. Here we see him taking that Balance. This is the kind of card that, it's the kind of card that if your opponent doesn't expect it out of you, you can just kind of sandbag it in, game 2 or something. They commit to the board, and oops, I actually had this incredibly powerful 2-mana board wipe in my deck that you didn't expect me to have. I guess, actually, I should say, we did see Dom really prioritizing Planeswalkers. Again, there's not a ton running around here. He has at least 2 really good Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers are the best thing, I think, on average to play with Balance, because Balance does not see those Planeswalkers. They don't count towards any of the various counts. Now we're looking at Edge of Autumn, Restless Vinestalk, perhaps a Wolfbriar Elemental. Wolfbriar Elemental being a great example of the kind of card that you have at the top of the curve here. It's a 4-drop, but you can also cast it for 5 or 6 or even more. Dom probably hoping he sees a card like Gaia's Cradle for this deck, perhaps, or some other way to generate a ton of mana and really make this top end of his curve sing. A little bit in the tank here. Edge of Autumn, great combo with Jarail, great combo with Titania, Protector of Argoth. Thinking about that Restless Vinestalk, but at the end of the day, just the Edge of Autumn is going to be the pick. I do think that Dom is going to be hard-pressed to play a basic in his splash colors. Looks like he's getting this Unexpectedly Absent fairly late here for his deck, so he's got a little more interaction to lean on now. But in a deck like this, where you have a decent number of fixing lands and you're really leaning heavily on one color, you often don't want to give up a land slot for a basic to turn a card like Edge of Autumn into fixing. So if it's going to be ramp, no matter what. He's going to have a lot of force in his deck. But the question is, can he afford to run the Mountain to let him cast Territorial Kavu, or the Plains, so Private Plains? He's got more white cards than any other color. A lot of blue cards left in this pack. Couple 2-mana counterspells here. Looks like Lose Focus. I would guess we'll see that as a sideboard card here for Dom. I'd be very surprised to see him main decking that Lose Focus.
And that was a Blood Crypt?
Blood Crypt still in the pack, yep.
That's kind of surprising.
Yeah, I think the way that it works oftentimes with 3 copies of every single Shockland is you really want the first copy in your colors for sure. That's a really high pick. So if you're playing any combination of Black-Red, and a late Kolaghan's Command. Now, this is a situation where I would actually be very tempted to start hate drafting in team draft style. He took a Stern Scolding, which maybe he'll play, maybe not. But Kolaghan's Command is really good against his deck, a really powerful 2-for-1 removal spell that I might not want to risk my opponent that I'm passing to my left be playing red-green to get that card so late. We're wrapping up the draft here, and Dom has gone, like we said, pretty heavily into a mostly green deck. I suspect we'll see exactly green-white, maybe splashing for a blue spell or 2 based on his draft, but leaning really heavily green for sure.
So it seems like he got the ramp in the top end.
Yeah, I think Dom's deck does all the things he's going to want it to do. What green is going to struggle with in this cube is going to be removal. You are not going to have ways to really reach out and proactively remove your opponent's threats. You have to just actually deploy your own and hope they are bigger and better and stronger. So I think Dom's going to have to, really have a good way to deal with those early threats to make his top end matter. Otherwise, he's got the great top end, but he'll just be dead before he can get there. While we are waiting for our players to do their deck building, we are going to read an ad from one of our lovely sponsors here at CubeCon. And the first sponsor we want to tell you about is CubeHeads. This is an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, Steve, has started a beautiful YouTube channel where he is interviewing various Cube personalities, content creators, Cube players, Cube curators, to kind of document the community that Cube is. Which, there's a lot of great Cube content out there for people that want to strategize on how to design your cubes. But at the end of the day, I think we all play Magic because we just want to sit around the table with people we like. And the great thing about Cube Heads and Steve's videos is that he's highlighting that aspect of the community, just the people that make it up and put it all together. I'll personally recommend his interview with T-Pug, Tyler Pugiles, the designer of the Jun Cube. I think that's a great interview there. And you can find all of these interviews at their YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/CubeHeads. That's CubeHeads. And thank you to CubeHeads for sponsoring CubeCon here in Madison. All right, let's speculate now. This is the best part of Team Draft is speculation. So I would bet dollars to donuts that J-Bro is playing heavily white, if not mono white, and got absolutely fed in Pack 2 by that Luris and that pick 15 Thalia, Guardian of Thraben. So if we have Dom in very heavy green, J-Bro in very heavy white, Sam Black, known for very inventive decks that will combine a lot of cards from many colors, I would expect that Sam was very excited to see that Uro, perhaps, and expect to see the Uro maybe in Sam's deck. Sam maybe getting that late Croxa, maybe perhaps playing a greedier deck. And that leaves Emma and Caleb and Vince. I don't actually know what Vince could possibly be drafting. I know Emma was maybe thinking about playing an aggro deck herself, but we're going to have to see how these break out. Our first match is going to be Dom Harvey versus Caleb Durward. Caleb being last year's CubeCon champion, had a great record in the two-day main event. Went to top 64, won that draft, and then won the top 8 draft in surprising fashion with a Dark Depths deck in the Vintage Cube.
I heard that he actually took a nap.
He was taking a nap instead of going to the bar. Well, that's going to give him a huge advantage, a huge leg up in this matchup.
No, not this time. Last time. Like, he actually took some time to take a nap, like, during the cubes. He didn't play them all.
Oh, well, I mean, that would also help. Resting up, I think that's really understated, important part of doing a big tournament like this. This is a lot of Magic you're going to play over the course of a weekend, and being well-rested and well-fed is going to be key. So, yeah, Caleb certainly, whatever he did last year worked, and he's back here to try and defend his crown. Dom Harvey hoping to stand in the way, at least in this Wisconsin versus England team draft. And we're going to see how that wraps up when we get back here. So tune in. We'll be back soon with Game 1, Dom Harvey versus Caleb Durward. Stay tuned.